fearless samurais charging into battle, cunning shinobis infiltrating backlines, and Ozutsu cannons blasting through enemies. Welcome to Asia Noob everyone, and to this exclusive preview of all new Japanese unique units in Age of Empires 4. The Japanese have more unique units than standard ones, so let's begin with the barracks. The Samurai is available to train from the Dark Age and mimics the mana timeline almost exactly. The only two differences are in their cost and special ability. Samurai cost 10 additional gold at 100 food and 30 gold each, but they have a unique passive called Deflective Armor, which blocks one melee or range attack, and they can recharge this ability in 8 seconds once they're out of combat. This may sound mediocre at first, but remember that ignoring the first attack can make all the difference in an engagement to tip it in your favor. That said, they do have one unique technology called Odachi, which replaces their weapon and adds 4 additional damage versus infantry. I also really liked the fact that most of these unique technologies do have a visual change on their units, and just like the teardrop shields for the Byzantines, this is the case as well with Odachi for the Samurai. The other unique infantry unit is the Onna-Bugeisha. She is a light melee infantry unit with no armor, but is very fast on her feet and has almost twice the range in her attacks. Hence, she will be mostly used in shock attacks versus low HP and armor targets, while leaving the front lining to the samurai themselves. The Onna-Bugeisha will no doubt struggle against most cavalry and range units, so make sure you use their speed to get them out of trouble. They do cost much less than the samurai and train in only 15 seconds, so although getting a solid mass of these warriors should not be a problem, making good use of them will be more difficult compared to other traditional units. Next up are the long talked about unit, the Shinobi. These ninjas can only be trained via the Koka Township landmark, and they have 3 abilities. The first is to disguise as an enemy villager to infiltrate the enemy. The second is to sabotage enemy buildings, which deals 200 damage, sets them on fire, and, most importantly, disables its production for 30 seconds. And third is the smoke bomb to get in and out of trouble. The spy ability can be used on either an enemy unit or structure, so as long as you have vision of anything of the enemy, you can use the spy ability immediately. That said, it doesn't really matter what you target with this ability, as the shinobi will only disguise as an enemy villager. Do keep in mind that scouts can detect disguised shinobi immediately when they go through their line of sight, and the same applies to the TC line of sight as well. Consequently, although the shinobi are available feudal onward, making good use of them that early against opponents who are paying attention will be very tough. This is because the landmark town center already has such an enormous range in the early game that getting close to enemy production buildings in the first place will be very difficult. Not to mention that if your opponent has already scouted that you went for the Koka Township landmark, they can simply park a scout around their production buildings to ensure that no pesky shinobi is left undetected. This is why I mentioned that you need to be sneaky with them in the early to mid game, and will likely have to use smoke bombs, which is the Shunshin ability, to infiltrate more discreetly. Also, the shinobi cost 60 food and gold, so they're slightly cheaper than the samurai. They do not have any armor like the Onna-Bugeisha, but they have similar HP. However, they have an insane base attack of 20 and can be theoretically increased all the way up to 38 damage with all upgrades. They also have a bonus plus 5 damage versus melee units as well, so shinobi's damage is not to be underestimated. Moreover, their Shunshin ability can be a rather useful tool to disengage from bad engagements if caught out of position. As shown in the beginning of the video as well, they can also go through enemy walls to cause havoc inside. And finally, the shinobi also passively heal on their own, but it's painfully slow. I believe it's 1 HP every 4 or 5 seconds, so practically speaking, you should never be passively waiting for minutes for them to heal back to full. All in all, the shinobi is a fantastic unit that is very annoying to deal with, but remember that they can only be produced every 23 seconds from a singular landmark. Hence, they cannot be easily masked, and as long as you have a few active scouts and defend your production buildings passively with good city planning, you should be able to minimize the damage from these ninjas. And finally, the Japanese Spearman is generic until the Imperial Age, in which they can be upgraded with their unique technology, the Naga-Eyari. They begin wielding a much longer spear that increases their weapon range by 20% and damage against cavalry by 20% as well, so it's a nice buff in the late game. Also, if you are enjoying my coverage of the DLC so far, please consider subscribing to Age of Noob to help support me further. Thank you. Moving on to ranged units, the Yumi Ashigaru replaces the archers for the Japanese. They are 15 wood cheaper than regular archers and move faster as well. On the flip side, they have slightly less HP, but their cheaper cost and faster movement speed more than make up for it. The Yumi Ashigaru will definitely compose an important part of your roster, especially early on. Furthermore, the Onna-Musha replaces the crossbowman for the Japanese as well. The Onna-Musha has slightly more HP compared to crossbows when fully upgraded due to biology, and they also have half a tile longer attack range. They're of course much faster given they're on horseback, and that they have a unique ability called Kaburaya, which increases their movement speed for 10 seconds, but can only be used when an enemy is spotted. To make up for all these improvements compared to the crossbows, the Onna-Musha costs 20 more gold, and their damage output is slightly lower overall. In summary, the Onna-Musha might be one of the more useful units in the game, as they will make short work of any Man-at-Arm variant and can even easily deal with knights if they can maintain their critical mass. Their Kaburaya ability is also a fantastic engage and disengage tool that will allow you to not only catch enemy units, but also flee from a bad position. Apart from these two, the Japanese also have access to the hand Cannoneer, but they are generic and have otherwise no special bonuses or upgrades. In the stable, the knight is replaced by the mounted samurais, which, just like the infantry samurai against their man-at-arm counterparts, are almost identical to the knights. The only difference here is the same deflective armor ability, which is even more useful for them since they can disengage to recharge easier, as they gallop faster than the knights. The price difference is only 10 more gold, so they're definitely better than generic knights for sure. Once again, do not underestimate the deflective armor ability, as taking on a charged attack unscathed is no joke. On top of all of these unique units, there's a Bannerman version in each of the barracks, archer range, and stable, which are the Katana Bannerman, Yumi Bannerman, and Uma Bannerman respectively. These Bannermen can only be trained in limited numbers, so check back on the Japanese Civ review to learn more about the details. That said, these units are slightly stronger compared to their fully upgraded counterparts stats-wise, but what makes them special are their banner auras. This very large aura provides 15% increased damage to their own unit types, so having one Bannerman per group of units will be key. The banner also falls on the ground and continues to provide the aura for another 30 seconds in that area, so nuking down these Bannermen alone won't be enough to get rid of the aura for another half a minute. In the Siege Workshop, there's nothing special for the Japanese. They get the typical rams, springles, mangonels, counterweight trebuchets, bombards, and rebeldoquins with otherwise no special bonus or unique technology to improve them. That said, they do have a unique siege-ish unit called the Ozutsu, but they're not trained in the Siege Workshop, so I'll cover them at the end. From a religious perspective, the Japanese have two options to pick from. The first option is to go with Buddhism, which allows them to train Buddhist monks. They only cost 100 gold, so they are significantly cheaper, but they also have a unique ability called Sohei's Sutra, which reduces enemy damage by 50% for an entire minute. They also provide a 20% damage buff to your units when casting a conversion, but I don't see this realistically being put to use often in most games. If you choose Shinto instead of Buddhism, however, then you can train Shinto Priests instead. They cost the full 115 gold and are otherwise exactly like regular monks. However, the only difference here is that they can pick up the Yorishiros that spawn from the floating gate landmark and place them in production buildings. The production boost differs from building to building, so keep that in mind. When we hit the sails, the Japanese have a unique shore-sieging lord ship called the Atakebune in the Imperial Age. Their projectiles look very similar to the Nest of Bees, and while they do decent damage against buildings, they're not that great for much else given their cost. And finally, the Ozutsu. They cost 85 food and 155 gold, and they are a peculiar hybrid of mangonels and cannons. Cannons have a 3.5 tiles more range and deal more than triple the damage against buildings, but they do move slower, cost twice as much, and take up triple the population space. They're also technically not even considered a siege unit, as they're officially, quote, heavy-ranged gunpowder infantry. Hence, the Ozutsu is kind of the jack-of-all-trades but master-of-none type of unit, and perhaps they have a place in a strong Japanese army composition. It's really tough to tell how strong they are this early given their peculiar hybrid role, so time will tell if they're any good, or if you should just stick with the mangonel and cannon duo on the battlefield. Well, that wraps up my summary of all military units for the Japanese in Age of Empires 4. Come back in a day or two for the summary of the Ayyubid units next. Many thanks to our YouTube members for their continued support, and please consider joining as a member as well if you'd like to support me further. Thank you. As always, thanks for watching everyone. Let me know what you think of the new Japanese units so far, and until next time, sayonara.